Right, so we are in Go 4 of this quadrilateral unit, and this one is on rhombis and squares. And so we're going to talk about how we know that a parallelogram is a rhombi or square. And that's our goal today, is that you will know the properties and you can use the properties of rhombi and squares. So just to talk about or kind of remind ourselves, we went through quadrilaterals, we went through parallelograms. Remember those properties: opposite sides are equal, opposite angles are equal, the diagonals bisect each other, the sides are parallel, opposite sides are parallel, and that the consecutive angles are 180. That's the parallelograms. Then we added on the rectangles. If it's a rectangle, so it's also a parallelogram, so all 5 of those, plus the diagonals are congruent. And now we're going to add on some properties for rhombi and squares that might separate it from being a rectangle. So these are 2 more special types of parallelograms. So all 5 parallelogram properties will still apply. So a rhombus has 4 equal sides. So all the sides are equal. And a square has 4 equal sides also. But it also has 4 90-degree angles. So all square are rhombi, but not all rhombus or rhombi are squares. So here, if it's a parallelogram, if a parallelogram is a rhombus, then its diagonals are perpendicular. So very first property is that if I have a parallelogram, all those 5 properties are true, and the sides are equal, then I know these diagonals are going to be a 90-degree angle, which kind of brings in some Pythagorean theorem and those types of concepts. If a parallelogram is a rhombus, then the diagonals bisect the angles. So 1 and 2 are equal, 3 and 4 are equal, 6 and 5, 8 and 7 are equal. So this is a rhombus. So we know those 2 properties that we just heard. Well, we know all the sides are equal just because of the definition of a rhombus. We know this is 90 degrees, and we know these angles are equal, these angles are equal to each other. So they're telling us that the rhombus, those are the things we know. So WZX, this angle is 39.5. We want to find ZYX, this whole angle right here. So I know this is 39.5, I know this is 90, and the angles in a triangle add up to be 180. So if I take 39.5 plus my 90, I get 129.5. And then I do 180 minus 129.5. And I get 50.5. So this little part here is 50.5. And since it's a rhombus, this is also 50.5. So the whole angle, ZYX, is 101. So therefore, ZYX equals 50.5 plus 50.5, which equals 101 degrees. All right, diagonals of a rhombus, WXYZ. So again, I know it's a rhombus. All these sides are equal. These still bisect each other just because it's a parallelogram, but the special things is this is 90, and these angles are equal to each other. These angles are equal to each other. So when you hear that word rhombus, these are some things that we should know. WX is 8x minus 5, and WZ is 6x plus 3. Well, we know because it's a rhombus that those are equals. Again, we are always trying to set up an equation in geometry here. So 8x minus 5 equals 6x plus 3. Subtract our 6x over 2x minus 5 equals 3. Add 5. 2x equals 8. And divide by 2. X equals 4. And again, I always want to check to make sure I found what I'm looking for. I'm trying to find x. I did find x, but sometimes it'll have me plug back in. So this is kind of like before. We know it's a rhombus. We know ABC is 126. We're trying to find CDB. This angle right here, we know this whole angle is 126. So hopefully you can see that that makes this, that we can split those two in half, and then that will help me find this one. So you should find that that is 63. And then here, BC and CD are going to be equal, and solve for x, and I'll let you do that in your notes. Try that on your own and see which one of these answers you get. I would pause the video here and do that. So just a little bit about, we have all this group of parallelograms. Inside there we have this group of rectangles where the angles are 90 and the diagonals are equal. Inside the rectangles you have this group of squares. Angles are 90, but the sides are all equal, but there's still a rectangle. And over here we have these rhombi who are parallelograms, but their sides are equal. And inside the rhombi you have a special set of squares. So a square is a rectangle and a rhombi. So here's a couple more conditions. This is kind of doing the converse. So if I have a parallelogram and the diagonals are perpendicular, then it is a rhombus. If the diagonals bisect the angles, then it's a rhombus. If we have a set of equal sides, then it's a rhombus. And if it's both a rectangle and a rhombus, then it's a square. So a square has equal sides, 90-degree angles, diagonals are equal, the diagonals are perpendicular, and the diagonals bisect the angles, so that cuts these angles all into 45. So Hector is measuring the boundary of a new garden. He wants the garden to be square. He has a set of corner stakes 6 feet apart. So we know right here, since I have 2 consecutive sides, this is a rhombus. But he wants it to be a square. So to make it a square, we've got to just check and see if the diagonals are equal, or that these are 90 degrees, kind of depending on what he has. Since he's measuring, we're going to say the diagonals. What does Hector need to know? He needs to know that the diagonals are congruent. So this is kind of similar. The last thing we want to do is take this onto the coordinate plane here. So here, this is in your homework. We're going to decide if it's a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square. So these are individual. If it's a square, it's going to be all 3. So if you name a square, you should list all 3 of them. So first you're going to graph it here. Actually, we're going to just, yeah, let's graph it. We're going to plot them here, just for time's sake. And we can see that, so let's check to see if it's a rhombus. Then if it's a rhombus, BC is going to be, needs to be congruent to CD. So the length of BC is 4 squared plus 1 squared, the square root of that, the square root of 16 plus 1, which equals the square root of 17. And CD equals 4 squared plus 1 squared. So we're doing the same thing, so I can know that that's square root of 17. So right here, this shows it's a rhombus. Next, we're going to check to see if the diagonals are equal, because if the diagonals are equal, then it's a square. So I'm going to look at BD equals, so from here to here, I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, or 3, and down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And CA I go up 3 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have, again, 3 squared plus 5 squared, which is the square root of 34. So since the diagonals are equal, that's what makes it a rectangle. And since it's both a rectangle and a rhombus, it is all 3. So this is a rhombus, rectangle, and a square. And you want to name all of them in your homework. Great. Once you finish this and you feel like you understand that, then go to your assignment and begin that. And we will talk to you sometime this week in a Google meeting or Zoom, and I'll set that up. Thank you. Have a great day.